Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Bhakti Community. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today, Bhakti On, where we continue our series, Boxing with the Mind. And today's topic is Mistakes of the Mind, the mind's greatest trick. It convinces you it's on your side. With the speaker today, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. People are still dialing in, and I have got Premanishta helping me out in managing social media today. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome back to another episode of Bhakti On.
Thank you so much, Jam. It's good to be back. And just as a disclaimer, the mind can be on your side if you play your cards right. And that's what we'll be talking about tonight. There are mistakes that can be overcome through the process of bhakti yoga. And that's good news to start with, because we don't have to live with our worst enemy, which can be the mind if it's not tamed or taken care of properly, right? Well, great to see everybody. Thank you very much. I think that we've had over the last several episodes an opportunity to start with some mantra meditation. And I think it's a good introduction because even those who are joining as we get going can walk into a serene environment where we're uttering the mantra. So if you'd like to participate, then just take a moment to feel comfortable where you are and maybe sit up slightly straighter than you were a second ago. And try closing your eyes and bringing your awareness to your breath. It can be really helpful to count 4 and in and 4 out, just so you calibrate a little bit. And just come into the present moment. If there are any thoughts, any emotions, just notice them and then let them go just for now. You can come back later and entertain them, or they can entertain you. And I'm going to hopefully put on a drone instrument that is a little more harmonious than the last one. We'll see how that goes. And then we'll take a few minutes for some mantra meditation. And here comes the drone. So the mantra we'll begin with tonight is Nitai Gauranga, naming the avatars Nitai and Gauranga, or the gateway to spiritual understanding and opening the heart. And so I'm going to repeat the mantra 5 times. If you'd like, behind muted mics, you can follow along. Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga. Just take a moment to observe any effects of the sound vibration. According to the ancient wisdom literatures, the world is created by sound, and one can be liberated by sound the quality of the sound that we listen to determines the quality of our lives, because it determines the quality of our consciousness. And so the sages practiced mantra meditation. Man means mind, and tra means to uplift or deliver. One of the ways to make the mind one's friend is to purify it by listening to transcendental sound. These mantras are full of spiritual potency, and one needn't do more than say them and listen to them and stay absorbed in the sound. The proof of the pudding is in the tasting. And similarly with mantra meditation, one can experience the otherworldly nature of the mantra by chanting it and listening to it. And bring your awareness back to your breath. And I'll reduce the drone and we can come back into the room. And welcome back. We're continuing our series called Boxing with the Mind. And I'm going to start tonight with a quote from one of the great boxers from the world of boxing, Manny Pacquiao. And he said, "If you work hard in training, the fight is easy." And this concept is parallel with the idea of Bhakti Yoga, which begins with what's called sadhana bhakti, or practice. And one who practices is called the sadhu, and the goal is called the sadhya. And on the other side, if a boxer sits around and doesn't practice or stay in physical shape, will likely get beat up in the ring. So in a similar way, if we don't practice purifying the mind, uplifting the mind, it's very likely that we'll get beat up by our own minds. And from the Bhagavad Gita, we have this quote, which Krishna mentions that for one who's conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his or her mind will remain the greatest enemy. And we can keep in mind that wherever we go, we take our minds with us. In the next slide, we have this graphic of a person walking through a pristine environment and being flanked by the many anxieties and machinations that are going on within his mind. As the old Buddhist saying goes, wherever you go, there you are. It's the state of your mind that creates your perception of the world and your sense of well-being or not. And therefore, this advice given in all the wisdom literatures that one should attend to one's mind is vital for a happy life. And one of the features of the mind, it's a mechanism, albeit a subtle one. It's a high technology. We see in the next slide a fact that is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, also the Yoga Sutras, that your mind records and saves everything. In fact, you can consider your senses, starting with your eyes, to be video cameras looking out into the world. And it records everything you see. Sound goes in here. It gets stored in the mind. That's why you're likely able to remember songs from when you were a kid, maybe even jingles from advertisements. It's all in there. It all gets recorded. That's why, says the next slide, yogis are very careful about moving about the world. And one way to think about the various enticements of sound, smell, taste, it's clickbait put out there for the unaware. If you click on it, then you may be captured and taken into, or I should say, down the rabbit hole. And so yogis are careful where they click, using a modern advancement, a modern example. When we look at the world in a way of trying to possess it, enjoy it, in a visceral sense, without analyzing what it actually is, which world we're interacting with and why, if we're just drawn by the senses one way or another, then in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives a series of consequences, which is a helpful word in and of itself, because sequence means there's an unfoldment of events that take place, and it starts with us clicking on something in the material world. We may have had this experience of scrolling through some web pages looking for something, and then you get distracted by something else, and then, oh, I'll click on it. Next thing you know, you're in a completely different universe. And so in the same way, this whole world we click on by looking at it. And the way Krishna describes it in the Bhagavad Gita is dhyayato, which means that we contemplate it. We look at it with an intent to try to capture it and enjoy it, or keep it for ourselves. Maybe I could have that. And then that leads to an attachment, and the attachment leads to frustration because we can't keep it. So there's another way of training the mind to look at the things of the world without clicking on them in the wrong way, or clicking on them at all, knowing what's behind them. I'll go into more detail on that because it's a subtle point and it's worth discussing more thoroughly. And that brings us to the main topic of this slide deck. After that preamble, which is presented in the next slide, which is the mistakes of the mind. And I'm going to go through each one of these slides. There's several of them. And these are the analyses of the sages like Patanjali Muni, who presents the psychology of yoga and how the mind works. And he categorizes the ways in which the mind makes mistakes. And when the mind makes mistakes, then we become imbalanced. It's called abhinibheshita, or absorbed in the temporary world, which causes us anxiety. So the first mistake of the mind is called avidya in Sanskrit. It roughly translates to ignorance. I'd like to pronounce ignorance as ignorance, because there's a way in which when you ignore the truth, or if you ignore another living being, it becomes troublesome. And ignorance means that we're unaware of what our real self-interest is. In fact, the Srimad Bhagavatam, one of the quintessential teachings on Bhakti Yoga, begins by stating its purpose, which is to distinguish reality from illusion for the welfare of everyone. Reality and illusion would be called avidya, or ignorance, darkness. And the wisdom literature say something very simple and enticing, which is tamasi ma jyotirgama. Come out of ignorance and come towards the light. That's a simple instruction, right? If there's light to be had, gravitate towards that. Don't stay in darkness. But they don't leave us there in generalities. They give very clear definitions of what it means to be in darkness or ignorance. And these are the ways that the mind makes mistakes. If the mind's untrained and doesn't know how to make proper distinctions, then there's suffering. So the first aspect to ignorance is that the mind accepts the impermanent to be permanent. Now this is something that Krishna makes a big deal of in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, everything in this universe, including the universe itself, is temporary. It's manifest and then unmanifest at other times. Of course, it stays, according to our perspective, having a puny little lifespan of maybe 85, 100 years maximum. Even in geological time, that's nothing. In fact, there are living entities that I've observed in India around November time. They're called Diwali germs, and they're born in the late afternoon. They reproduce in the early evening. They go to Home Depot and build themselves a little house or whatever they do as it gets close to evening time. And by morning, the whole generation that was born is dead. That's their lifespan. It's just a couple hours. And ours is basically like that too. Compared to trees, for instance, in the redwood forest that live for thousands of years, and even they, compared to just the earth itself, they're just little sprouts, little bean sprouts on the surface of the earth that come up and go down, but geological time goes on for millions and millions of years. So having some perspective about what's permanent, what's impermanent. When the mind tricks us to think that this life is permanent, or that it could be, or we ignore the fact that it is impermanent, there's a buildup of cognitive dissonance. Because, as one psychologist put it in his book, Fear of Death, everything we do after that is a way to sublimate our fear of the impermanent. And that's because we identify with the impermanent, starting with the body. My body is impermanent. And it's on loan. It's like an Uber. If you get in an Uber and you start claiming that it's your car, the driver will summarily pull over and ask you to get out. And probably give you a bad rating too as a customer. Or if you go to an Airbnb and you move in and then you claim, this is mine, I'm going to be here forever, you might be blacklisted from going to other Airbnbs. So in a similar way, this world is impermanent, and the body we now inhabit is impermanent. But somehow or other, the mind gets attached to the idea that I'm my body and projects itself, we who are permanent, as conscious beings. We never die. But when we project ourselves into the body and say, I am this body, then as in a dream, when you feel like you're being chased by a tiger or somebody's trying to attack you, you might kick your legs in your sleep. Have you ever had that happen? Somebody's coming up, kick, and you wake up and you go like, oh. I was riding on an airplane, the guy over one seat over from me, he had a drink on his little table that was in front of him, and he started dozing, and all of a sudden he just, wah! And he kicked his legs, and the drink went flying, and he woke up, and he looked quite embarrassed by what had just happened. And our dream that we're part of this world, that this body is mine, I'll be here forever, this is comparable to the kind of fear that you have in a dream. And so all the ancient wisdom literatures, doesn't matter which discipline you're studying, just give a clear understanding that this world's temporary. In fact, my teacher once said, a transcendentalist is aware that I could leave this world at any time, whereas a materialist is somebody who thinks I'll live forever somehow. So this is one of the errors of the mind. And when the mind is in ignorance, it accepts what's impermanent to be permanent. That's a substantial error. I mean, have to say, when that happens, then you're really getting off on the wrong foot for your day and your life, to think that the impermanent things in this world are permanent. Now, we do have a sense beneath everything that we are permanent. That's why about 10 years ago, when I was walking in my neighborhood, I found a graffito on the sidewalk, and it had a heart. You know, the heart that those who have a crush on somebody, they'll sometimes put it on a tree or a bench. This one was marked with a Sharpie. It was on the sidewalk, and it was a heart. And it had a little arrow through it. And then inside the heart, it said M plus M. And next to the heart, it said forever. And I went back and took a picture of it. I still have that picture, because I was thinking, where did they get the idea that they could have that love forever? I don't know if M and M actually got together, besides in the candy. But I have a sense that, that puppy love or whatever it was came and went. Nonetheless, one could ask, where did the sense that it would last forever come from? If you're in the middle of the desert and someone says, nobody's ever been here before, you're the first humans to ever walk across here, and then you look down and you find, let's say, a gold coin that was minted somewhere, obviously by human hands, and you pick it up, then you would say, oh, this is evidence that somebody was here previously. And when we find evidence that there's a conception of permanence, it means that we are getting that from somewhere. And that's our nature. Thanks, JM. This is like being on one of those radio shows where they can find the song you talk about in 5 seconds. That's the picture I took. M plus M forever. And there's even a couple of hearts within the heart. So they were really smitten, whoever it was. And forever. And even though it was written with a Sharpie, I hate to say this, but it's already gone. I mean, 10 years and it washed away somehow. The chemicals that were in that thing went down the drain, and they're somewhere in the San Francisco Bay right now. And who knows where M and M are. So if I accept a relationship as eternal when it's not, if I accept my house or my body, my money, anything as permanent when it's not, this is a mistake. It's a mistake that originates in our mind, an incorrect perception of the world. So the sages say this is something that you can work on by developing what's called vivek, or discrimination, to know the difference between what's permanent and what's impermanent. And when we have a clearer understanding of the categories of energy of this world, that some energies are impermanent and some are permanent, then we can reconcile how we have these feelings that we want to live forever. And we also wish that other people would too. I mean, who wants, their favorite movie star to start looking old? Everyone said, oh, no, don't show me that. I want to remember him or her the way they were back when I had a crush on them when I was a kid, or whatever. We want everything to hold on forever. Well, that's pretty tricky, Jam. He even put it in my deck, too. Thank you. So that's a mistake. And the next one is to accept the impure to be pure. There are impurities that obscure our ability to use our minds effectively. And if we ingest those impurities through the sound we listen to, through the things we look at, through the people we associate with, and so forth, not knowing what the effect of those associations and those sensual interactions will cause. This is also a mistake of the mind. And some of the sages who talk about Bhakti Yoga poetically mention a very startling metaphor, and they say that's kind of like when you have a glass with a really tasty smoothie in it and another glass that's full of poison, and then you pick the poison glass instead of the smoothie. It's a mistake. So the basis of this is that there are higher and lower energies in the world, and we must know the effects they have on us. When the mind isn't educated, doesn't have vivek or discrimination to know what to accept or what to leave behind, then the mind becomes affected. And when we take impurities into our mind, then it obscures our ability to see ourselves, to see our ultimate good in life, and we remain in ignorance. That's a subcategory of ignorance, according to the sage Patanjali Muni. And the third one is to accept pain as happiness. Now, this is probably recognizable since we studied a while back the effects of the modalities of this world and the way they obscure our discrimination, our power of discrimination. And there's a way in which when we take activities into our lives that actually cause us pain, and we think that they're pleasurable, this is a feature of ignorance. And again, one has to be wiser than that to understand the effects that various interactions have in our lives. That's why Patanjali Muni, in his presentation of yoga, goes in great length about adjusting your lifestyle. Of course, his process is based more on the ability to meditate silently. And he points out that unless you clean up your lifestyle, you won't be able to sit down for even 1 second, because your mind will be so disturbed by the ways that you're interacting with the world. For instance, he talks about being truthful, because if you're a liar, if you lie, then when you sit down to meditate, you won't be able to, because your mind will be so disturbed thinking of how you're going to work this out. That is, not get caught in a lie and so forth. So he talks about various ways we have to improve our lifestyle. And this has to do with these discriminations that we have to, let me speak regular English. This has to do with understanding what's important, what's pure, what's impure, what leads to pain and what leads to real happiness. And finally, we have number 4 in the category of ignorance. I don't know if they ever had this on Jeopardy. Ignorance for 500. You get down, what is the non-self as the self? Say it as a question. This is an aspect of ignorance, to accept the non-self to be the self. This relates very much to the idea of permanent, impermanent, because although we have a body, we're not the body, and when you accept the body as the self, then it's a feature of ignorance. And this is one of the mistakes of the mind that can be overcome through introspection and also through the practice of mantra meditation and the practice of hearing correct knowledge, which comes from what is called Shastra. Shastra means the self-illuminated knowledge system that comes from a perfect source. It's axiomatic. And by hearing from that, helps us to develop that feature I mentioned called vivek, which is discrimination. It strengthens the intelligence, which then helps us to overcome the mind. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about the hierarchy that we're involved with as conscious beings, the hierarchy that is this body. So he says, lowest of all is the senses. That includes all our senses, like the knowledge-gathering senses. There's a division between those and the working senses. The knowledge-gathering senses, if you think about them, they're pretty interesting. Like, how do we gather visual information? We just look around. And then there's the auditory sense and the tactile sense. And then we have taste, smell, all these mostly grouped about the head. And then the working senses, like the arms, legs, belly, genitals, rectum, those are all called working senses. So the body really is a bundle of senses, which are gathering information from the world and manipulating the world in different ways. And those in the hierarchy are the lowest. Above the senses is the mind. The mind's much subtler than the senses, but subtler still is the intelligence, the intellect called the buddhi, which is above the mind. But it's not consciousness. The buddhi and the mind are not conscious. Just like if you've ever seen a church with a stained glass window, if there's no light behind it, it just looks dark. You don't see the patterns. But as soon as you illuminate it, then you'll see all the patterns, and it looks quite lively. In the same way, our intelligence, our mind, they're lifeless until the conscious being is next to them. That's what illuminates them and makes them look alive. And when we ourselves observe our minds and our intellects, and they seem luminous, we can be misled and think, oh, that's me, I'm my mind, or I'm my intellect. But Krishna says, nope, not so fast. That's a mistake. Above the intellect is the soul proper, or the conscious being that's categorically different from all the other entities that are lower than it. And they all work in cooperation so that we can experience the world. It's kind of virtual reality experience. And so the one objective that Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita and Patanjali Muni mentions in the Yoga Sutras, it's also there in the Upanishads, which the Bhagavad Gita is also called the Gita Upanishad, is to learn how to identify these mistakes and to rectify them. The more one purifies the mind, the more one has vivek or discrimination, and then the more one has the power to rise above the demands of the senses. Because if we don't have command over the senses, then we haven't even taken the first step, which is mentioned in a book called the Upadeshamrita. The great sage, Rupa Goswami, is considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest teacher of Bhakti Yoga of all times. He lived over 500 years ago. He wrote several books, and one of them you can carry in your pocket and pull it out at intervals and just educate yourself in the process of Bhakti Yoga. It's called the Upadeshamrita, which translated in English means, Amrita means nectar, and Upadesh means advice. So he calls this is the nectar of all advice. And the first piece of advice he writes in the book, it starts off, Vacho vegam, manasakroda vegam, jihva vegam, udarapasta vegam, etan vegam, yo vishaheta dira, sarvamapimam pritivim nasishat. And he says that the person who is able to conquer the lower self or the senses by the mind and the intelligence, and ultimately by one's own independence as a conscious being, is actually the master of the world, because he makes the argument that the real masters of this world are the senses. Everybody's controlled by the senses and the uncontrolled mind, and they're just being pulled in different directions helplessly. So if one can become a master of the senses, master of the mind, then that one puts one in squarely in a position to, well, be completely happy. What's more, to be completely productive. And that's the beginning of the book itself. And so Bhakti Yoga also presents that this is not intellectual knowledge. It's not academic. There's a kind of knowing that we get by direct engagement in the process of Bhakti Yoga, which has to do with love and gratitude. If you've ever noticed, in loving, there's a kind of essential knowing. It comes naturally. And when one has love for the Supreme Consciousness, who's our personal friend, then there's a natural flow of what's called buddhi. And that connection to knowledge is called buddhi yoga, when you know what to do. And it has less to do with sitting on a mountaintop and bathing in cold streams in the winter and performing severe austerities than it does is just being sincere. This is one of the points Krishna makes in the Bhagavad Gita, how to overcome these errors of the mind and come to this sense of clarity. And that is to be sincere and really want to know the truth. Because if you're sincere and you want to know the truth, you try for it, pray for it, then it comes naturally flowing into your heart. There's another metaphor in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, Tesham evanukam partam aham jnana jam tamaha nashayam yatma bhavasto jnana deepena bhashvata. It's really beautiful. A jnana deep. A deep means a flame and jnana means knowledge. So he's saying that the Supreme resides in your heart. And when you sincerely endeavor to know the Supreme, even if you have no idea how to do it, but if you're sincere about it, then he says that personality in your heart will light the lamp and then hold it for you, and you'll be able to see your way. And then the darkness, jnana, he says, nashayam yatma bhavasto, that the darkness is dissipated, as if someone lit a lamp in your heart. So it's not that we have to painstakingly, learn how to control the senses, although a modicum of regulation is needed to get started. Because as my teacher used to say, if you're going to start a fire, you don't want to pour water on it simultaneously. If people are performing activities that are very distracting and that contaminate the senses again and again, it's really hard to get into that sincere mode and see clearly long enough to have that illumination in the heart. So there's more mistakes of the mind. But I'm going to go to those in just a minute, because this has been so far a monologue with absolutely no discussion whatsoever. And maybe we can remedy that. And that means, do you have any comments or questions? Now it's all you. Wow, the board's lighting up, JM. This is fantastic. Although Subhadra dropped off suddenly. Okay, go ahead, JM.
Go ahead, Krishna sir, please.
Hey everyone, I would like to introduce Mundo. He's joining here for the first time. I met him in one of our Kirtan festivals in Palo Alto, and he received a Srimad Bhagavatam set. He has already read first some of it, and he was saying it answered his essential questions he had, and also the nature of the self and God. So yeah, welcome Mandal. Thank you for joining, and If you want to say hi, feel free to unmute.
Hello. How are you guys doing?
Good to have you here. Thank you. Is it Wendell you saying?
It's Edmundo.
Undo. Hi,
Yeah,
Undo. Nice to have you here.
yeah. It's kind of appalling, or kind of like this is different. I've never considered the canto. I kind of grew up as a Catholic, or presumably kind of believed in it, but this is completely new. And like he said, um, reading the first chapter. Even the introduction just answered one of my most essential questions of life I've had since I was 4. And it's the difference between absolute truth and God. And it's just a question I've never considered. It's if it enlightened me in a way. But yeah, this is a new experience for me. And I'm grateful for being here.
Thanks, Mundo. We're grateful
Yeah,
to have you here.
yeah,
And it's an unfolding process, so we've kind of feel the same way you do. There's no end to it. It's not like, we come to a plateau and say, okay, now we know everything. It's
yeah,
unlimitedly fascinating, right?
yeah, it is. And it starts from one point in life, and everyone's perspective is, to me, in a sense, correct about what is God. Even people who don't believe in God have a sense or understanding of it, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean.
Yeah,
And
precisely.
did you happen to be walking by on University Avenue when you saw
Yeah, I
that?
was walking by, yeah. I
And what was it
drove.
like? What did it feel like when you saw everybody out there chanting?
It was almost like a magnetic to me. It kind of made me put all my attention into it, and it made me wonder what it was about. Uh, it's very magnetic. I'm not sure how to explain it.
That's perfect. In fact, the name that they chant during those presentations, Krishna, means magnetic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really.
that's what it means. Krishna means the attractor. Just
Mm,
like the biggest magnet that anybody could ever conceive of, it pulls everybody in. That's when we say Hare Krishna. Krishna means magnet. And
interesting.
the more we allow ourselves to be pulled in, then the more enlightened we become.
Wow.
So you're one of them because you were ready for it when you walked by, so you got immediately pulled in by the magnet.
Well, maybe, maybe I am.
Well, I know how you feel. Same thing happened to me when I was young-ish. I I heard the chanting and I couldn't get it out of my mind, and I thought this is some crazy thing. The next thing I know, I'm sitting here talking about it 50 years later.
It's ironic.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, thanks a lot, Mundo. Looking forward to hanging out sometime.
yeah. I'm looking forward to it too. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Krishna Saka, and welcome, Mandol. We have Sakala Subhaga next. Please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome Sandeep, who is joining back for the second time. Welcome, Sandeep. Yeah, if you'd like to unmute and say hi, please feel free to do so.
Welcome, Sandeep. Thank you for joining the call.
Yes, Sandeep, nice to have you here. Thank you very much for joining. Anyone else have guests I'd like to introduce? Then Subhadra, why don't you go ahead and say what you had?
I was just going to say, in relation to those first slides you had, a few years ago, I got a timer lockbox like you recommended, so that when I'm doing mantra meditation, I have to lock it in there. Sometimes just the threat of it makes me, behave. But what happened when I first locked it in there was then I realized there was a bunch of tabs open in my mind that I had to keep closing out. And so, and then it was kind of frustrating. And then I realized that I would need to not keep exposing myself to a bunch of different, trashy things that were keep coming up in my mind when I was trying to meditate. And one other thing I just wanted to say that Madhu, what was his name that just
Mundo.
spoke? Mundo, sorry. You reminded me of when I first started learning about this philosophy. And I knew about God. I was raised Catholic. And then I heard about the absolute truth. And that was a new concept for me too. And I remember telling my friends, did you ever think about the fact there's an absolute truth? Like it was just completely blowing my mind, and then it was kind of ridiculous that I never heard of it before. It felt like so odd. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
I really liked your analogy about the tabs in your mind and how you can trace them back to what you're looking at generally. And we talked a few weeks ago about starting a not to-do list and just being aware of the fact, like we mentioned, the clickbait and the yogis being careful what they click on, being sensitive to the world. Actually, the real trick is what could be called replacement therapy. And rather than trying to restrain, then we try to engage with subject matter that's higher, because the mind can't remain inactive, but it can engage with higher subject matters, which is what you do a lot. Okay, Jam.
Thank you. Please go ahead, Radhakrishna.
Yeah, just to continue with my sister actually just shared a quick instant. She's actually with my father at home. Then she was sharing that yesterday when my father wasn't, strictly doing his meditation, for many, many years. But recently he started picking up, and he takes almost like a 20 minutes to do one round. And he spends his I think 40 minutes in the evening to chant 2 rounds. And yesterday my uncle showed up during the time when he was chanting. My sister just told me that he said, I didn't like it. I didn't like it, it was not good, he doesn't like it. I mean, this is so stunning to hear from him that what he's doing, he's so engrossed in doing what he's doing it. And he said that to my sister that he didn't like it. His brother walking in during the same time. And that is the impact of mantra, which you are talking, how slowly we chant every day for 15 minutes. But as you have been chanting for many, many, almost like 5 years now slowly that impact I could see. I just thought to share the glorification of how
Yes,
one
very
gets.
encouraging. Thank you very much, Radhakrishna. Anything worth doing takes time to practice.
Thank you. Next we have is Ananga.
Hello, everybody. We actually have Richard Erhard with us today. We met him at Alameda Art and Wine Festival last Saturday. He's a very kind person who stopped at our table, and he was very interested in learning about meditation and yoga. And he himself pinged me asking today morning, early morning, that do we have a Zoom session today evening? I said yes, and I'll get back to you with the details. And he's here. Richard, would you like to just say hi to all your friends here?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Ananga, for the invite. We appreciate it. So my background, I'm spiritual with Native American, with the Apache tribe, White Mountain, and I've been active in the spiritual cleansing ceremonies with that. And I did do some meditation and some yoga in the past, and I wish to know more of meditation and of definitely yoga again. And just when I was there at the Art and Wine Festival in Alameda on Saturday, it was just magnetic, like just drew me in. So I was very grateful for that.
Grateful to have you here, Richard.
Thank you.
And there's that magnet metaphor again, too. It really is irresistible when you see it, right? Nice.
Thank you. Thanks, Ananga, and welcome, Richard. Glad to have you on the program. Looking forward. And I do have a couple of more people on the Zoom. I do want to read Annette's comments. She says, I appreciate the analogy of the world being clickbait. It's not just on the internet. It's interesting how seemingly innocent things can capture our attention, and also culture telling us what is acceptable.
Such good points. Thank you very much, Annette.
Thank you so much. And we have Denise next.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to all the new people. So the clickbait was a new word for me. I actually consider myself a non-scroller because and I dread my telephone because it means I have to work if it goes off. And today there was a post about a blog that was coming up, and it's a blog on minimalism. And one of the subjects they were going to talk about, I haven't listened to it, but one of the subjects they were going to talk about is, I guess, your clickbait. So scrolling, they said, is the new smoking. I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing to come out with that. So
Yeah, it's important to know that the mind can be a binibeshita, or absorbed or addicted to either matter or to spirit. Spirit means the higher energy, consciousness, and the process of bhakti yoga is to transfer from the inferior energy to the spiritual energy. It's okay to be absorbed. We have to be. It's the nature of consciousness to want to be active and engaged. So we can't stop. But if we transfer it to that which is transcendental, then we're perfectly aligned. And this is the state of being in yoga, when one's aligned with one's highest interest. Thank you very much, Denise. I like the term non-scroller. Maybe we'll put it on, make some merch like that. Okay,
Sounds
JM.
good. Yeah, please.
I think Sakala Subhag has
Yeah.
his hand up.
Yeah, just to share my reflection on the point that the world is permanent, the first point that you mentioned in the slide. A personal reflection was I was just thinking that everything is permanent, throughout the life. But I think one incident that happened like maybe 10 years back that has shaken my faith that it's not permanent. I think it was very difficult to process at the time, but I think if that not has happened, then it would be different path. But until that, I was just thinking that it's just my life, and to take care like it's in my own world. But that has helped me to see that it's not permanent. It's not permanent. It's temporary.
Yeah, and sometimes we see the impermanence of the world, but we still don't get it. That's in the Bhagavatam called Pashyanapina Pashyati. You mean you see it, but you don't get it. JM, the Shirchor Gopinath just wrote in.
Yeah. He's saying, regarding the clickbait analogy, it makes me think how brands put the majority of their budget into advertising rather than a quality product. Similarly, Maya makes the advertising in the material world incredibly convincing, but the product always disappoints.
Hey, bravo. Now there's a home run right there for metaphors. Well done. You can take that one to the bank. Okay, let's go back to the slideshow. And here we're continuing with the list that was created by none other than Patanjali Muni in his psychology book called the Yoga Sutras. And the next mistake of the mind is ego. And he describes this. Now, let me just differentiate, because ego just means a sense of self. Doesn't mean that we're not a self and we can't have a sense of self. More accurately, this could be called ahankar, or false ego. There's a real ego and a false ego. So when the ego, or a sense of self, is misplaced, it equates the power of seeing with the seer. So our senses have some power, but we're the one who's seeing. So the idea is we have senses, they're interacting with the world, and when we mistake ourselves, again, it's leading back to this misconception that we are the senses, and we think that our power to see is us. But we're beyond the senses. We're the one that's perceiving what the senses bring in. That's the main point. And we're beyond the ears and the eyes and nose that are made of fleshy substances and have an electronic system running to the brain and a method of interpretation. And then we come to two that are very recognizable. One mistake of the mind is raga, which relates to this attraction to impermanent things. And that means, raga means this quest to find the next thing in the world that will make me satisfied. And the mind becomes attracted to things. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about the person who's self-satisfied is beyond this raga, or the conception that things in the world make me happy. People who have risen to stardom and have become fabulously wealthy often tell us that I'm glad it happened, so I know that this isn't it. But we can learn that ourselves from the wisdom literatures and also by our own observations of the world. So when the mind is catching on to all the things of the world and they have a strong pull, then this is called raga. And then the next slide shows the opposite side of that, which is dvesha, or aversion, which means that because we have the experience that the things we grab onto with our minds here in this world lead to disappointment, then we try to give them all up and we become averse to the world. Or there are certain things we're averse to, we're predisposed to be averse to. And these, as we described earlier, come from our previous impressions from interaction with the world. And we find a phenomena that Lord Chaitanya, who taught Bhakti Yoga 500 years ago, described, which is called Bhoga Tyaga. Bhoga means the tendency to want to enjoy the world and grab onto things. And Tyaga means the tendency to want to give them up. And what happens is there's a pendulum swing. And when there's Bhoga, then you get frustrated, then you say, okay, I'm going to give it up, and it goes to Tyaga. I saw a documentary about a musician. People have probably heard of him. His name, Paul McCartney. He became very wealthy and famous, and still is, actually. He's worth over $1 billion. And he, after the Beatles broke up in 1969, he moved to Ireland with his wife, Linda, and they lived in a ramshackle cottage out in the wilderness, basically, and just took care of animals. It didn't even have hot water or anything like that. They became fabulously wealthy, but then they said, get us out of here. And so there's this swing back and forth, says Patanjali Muni, in the mind of attraction and then aversion. So he says one has to rise above this pendulum swing. And then finally, the final slide, which is always fascinating to me, how Patanjali Muni included this in his list of the mistakes of the mind, is called abhinibheshata. And Abhinibesha means clinging to bodily life. It means that at all costs, my greatest fear is that I'll lose this body. When it's already a foregone conclusion that we're going to lose it. And it's taboo to even talk about it. If you bring it up when you go home for the holidays and somebody says, what do you want to talk about? And say, let's talk about giving up the body. People will consider you a spoil sport and actually not invite you back next time because you're not civil. So this idea of clinging to bodily life and pretending like it's everything is, he says, the overarching mistake of the mind that colors everything that we do. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to try to end on time tonight. And I really appreciated meeting those of you who came here for the first time. Thank you very much for joining. I appreciated those who came for the second time and those who are regular joiners. It's quite a impressive feat to be able to drop everything in today's busy life and then jump on a conversation like this. Kurt, I'll talk about Purva Samskars next time, because whatever you ask, I'll always do.
Great.
Thanks a lot. And thank you, everybody. And that reminds me of one of the practices of these yogis who live high in the Himalayas. They have this interesting ritual that they do to encourage one another. When they see one another in the high peaks of the Himalayas, after they've come out of long meditation, they raise their hands high in the air and they bellow. It's a bellow. They don't even just say it, they bellow it. They say this phrase, Hari Bol, which means basically it's saying a name of God, Hari and Bol, keep chanting, they're saying, to encourage one another. And I just think it could be a nice thing for us to do as we're leaving. What do you think?
Yes.
I'm going to try it. Hari Bol!
Haribo!
Haribo!
Oh!